They were all threads in the same brilliant tapestry, woven by common people to not just survive, but to thrive against a system designed to crush them. They buried this truth with the most powerful weapon they had: history itself. They wrote the story you learned in school, a story of helpless peasants and all-powerful kings, of dark superstition and divine right. They made the people's network seem like scattered pockets of witchcraft. Why? Because you can burn a book, you can execute a leader, but a network, a shared idea in the minds of millions, is the one thing they cannot control. Your candle flame shivers, throwing your shadow, huge and distorted, against the vaulted ceiling. On the stone lid, you see the carving they are famous for: two knights, grim-faced and gaunt, riding a single horse. It was their public vow, a symbol of a poverty so profound they couldn't even afford a mount for each brother. A noble, pious lie. Your fingers, numb with cold, trace the outline of the warhorse. The stone is impossibly smooth, worn down by reverence or regret. This is a deliberate and profound lie. While kings built castles on stolen land, a different kind of power was growing in the dark places of the world. In Iceland, as early as 930 AD, an entire nation of free farmers was governing itself through the Althing, a functioning outdoor parliament. For centuries, in the high valleys of the Swiss Alps, entire communities of peasants formed alliances, swore oaths to each other instead of to a distant emperor, and ruled themselves through popular assemblies. They buried this history. They had to. They controlled who you could love, how you could love, and what your body was for. And by controlling that, they controlled everything else: the inheritance of land, the forging of political alliances, the very architecture of society. Think of it. It's a pattern that never dies. A distant, male-dominated authority claiming moral high ground to legislate your body, to control your personal and reproductive freedom, not to save your soul, but to preserve their power structure. It is a story written in 1310, and it is a story you can still read in the headlines tonight. A meager existence, eked out season by season. But that smell of ink is a loose thread in the tapestry. It pulls you deeper. Your boot scuffs against a loose flagstone. Not a wobble, but a hollow scrape that echoes in the quiet dark. You kneel, your fingers finding the edge. The stone is cold, heavy. Prying it up, you feel the grit grind under your nails, an ASMR-like sound that sets your teeth on edge. Beneath it is not a hole, but a small, carved-out compartment. And inside isn't gold or silver. It's something infinitely more valuable. It proved their authority was not only wrong, it was deadly. It's the ultimate institutional lie, a pattern that echoes through the centuries, demanding obedience even when it leads to your destruction. It's the same quiet horror we feel today, when an official body downplays a crisis, when disastrous advice is given to protect a reputation or an economic quarter, while those who speak the forbidden truth are censored and vilified. These peasants didn't just survive a disease, they survived the lethal incompetence of their leaders. It was an address. It was the mark of a secret movement, a peer-to-peer system for sharing truth in an age built on lies. The so-called ignorant peasant wasn't ignorant at all. They were a user, a node in a vast, organic conspiracy of human ingenuity that operated entirely outside the control of the elite. Think back. The impossible medical cures, the architectural marvels that defied physics, the plague survival tactics that saved entire villages while the rich died in their castles, the hidden economic markets. They weren't isolated miracles or acts of heresy. They were all connected. The thing that damned the Knights Templar wasn't the gold. It wasn't the rumored ceremonies in locked chapels or the accusations of spitting on the cross. It was a secret buried in a tomb like this one, a truth etched in stone, no bigger than your thumb. You're deep inside a Templar preceptory, a place abandoned to God and time. The air is so cold it feels solid in your lungs. Each breath a small, private ghost. Silence presses in from the stone walls. A heavy blanket woven from centuries of prayer and fear. Before you is a sarcophagus. The vote is on a coordinated plan, a terrifying, beautiful idea whispered from one smoke-stained cottage to the next. To refuse your labor, to let the Lord's grain rot in the fields during the harvest. A medieval strike. You feel the metallic taste of fear in your throat, but you also feel the warmth of the person beside you, the shared breath of this forbidden assembly. This is the Thingstead. This is power. 99% of people are taught that democracy was a lost Greek idea, a relic buried for 1,000 years until the Enlightenment rediscovered it. She refused to stop sharing her vision of a divine love that liberates the soul from all earthly control. For this, in the year 1310, the Church declared her a heretic. They tied her to a stake in the Place de Grève in Paris and burned her alive in front of a horrified crowd. But here is the truth they buried with her ashes. This was never about piety. It was about power. By preaching that all pleasure, all sexuality outside of procreative marriage was a mortal sin, the Church controlled the most fundamental aspect of human life. Down here, it's a different reality. The air is thick with the sweet rot of last year's apples, the sharp tang of spoiled wine from a leaky cask, and something else, something that doesn't belong. It's the clean, acidic scent of ink. Your eyes adjust to the gloom, lit only by the sliver of light from the doorway. You see the expected things: dirt-caked turnips in a pile, a few shriveled carrots, sacks of meal slumped against the wall. Their contents pray for the mice you can hear scratching just beyond sight. This is the official story of medieval survival. And the most forbidden secret of all, buried in church records for centuries, proves they were right. An analysis of mortality rates in the Diocese of Lincoln, hidden until our time, reveals a shocking truth. Parishes that ignored the official doctrine, the ones who listened to the whispers of a secret network of pragmatic knowledge and implemented their own strict isolation, had survival rates up to 50% higher than the devout, obedient parishes that prayed and perished. They buried this secret because it was more dangerous than the plague itself. You've been searching for a book, something bound in leather filled with ink. But you were looking for the wrong thing. The Book of Whispers was never a single object they could burn. It was something far more dangerous, something alive. The mystery is solved. The secret they buried for 1,000 years is this. The book was a network, a living, breathing, decentralized web of forbidden knowledge passed from one mind to another. That spiral symbol you saw etched into stone, woven into tapestries, hummed in a forgotten rhyme. It wasn't the title of a book. The final piece of this cosmic puzzle, the gear that unlocks its terrible, final prediction, lies somewhere else. and the clue to its location makes the blood in your veins turn to ice. It wasn't hidden in a monastery or buried with a saint. It was laid to rest in the tomb of their greatest enemy. Farmers, weavers, blacksmiths, people of the soil, bound by oath to a Lord you've never met. You are not here to pray. You are here to commit a crime that has no name. An old woman, her face a map of famines and hard winters, holds up a rough-spun bag. You hear the soft, deliberate clink of stone on stone as each person ahead of you reaches into a pouch, their knuckles scraping against the rough leather. They pull out a single, smooth river pebble, white for yes, black for no. They controlled their own finances, ran their own businesses as weavers and brewers, and created vast networks of economic power completely outside of male authority. They offered a path for women that wasn't wife or nun. It was simply free. And their God didn't demand obedience through a male priest. Their God was a direct, personal, ecstatic experience. A love so profound it made the church's laws irrelevant. This was a declaration of war. You think of the author of the book in your hands, Marguerite Porete. She wasn't some cloistered academic. She was a Beguine, a teacher, a revolutionary. The greatest lie they told you about the Middle Ages is that everyone was powerless. The truth was far more dangerous, and it was hidden right under their feet. The heavy cellar door groans open, a deep wooden sigh against the stone frame. You pull it wide, and a wave of cool, damp air washes over you, carrying the smell of the earth itself. You descend the steep, uneven steps, your hand trailing against the gritty, sweating wall for balance. The world above, the thin sunlight, the smell of wood smoke, the distant bleating of a sheep, vanishes. You don't see a face, just the glint of suspicion. You are the danger now. You are the outside world. The metallic taste of fear coats your tongue. You can hear a faint, rhythmic scraping sound from within the walls, the sound of a life being meticulously, desperately preserved. It's a sound you haven't heard in months, the sound of hope. This simple act of closing a gate was a revolution. It was a peasant with a handful of nails declaring that the archbishop's authority ended where his fence began. They are looking for nodes in the network, and you realize, with a sudden, gut-wrenching certainty that tastes like cold iron, he is looking for the next person who received the message. He is looking for you. It tracks the silent, elegant dance of the planets with a precision that feels like blasphemy. It maps a cosmos that doesn't need a divine hand to guide it every moment. But as you trace the intricate engravings, you realize something is missing. There's an empty housing, a socket where a final crucial gear should be. The machine can show you how the heavens move, but a cryptic inscription hints that its true purpose is to show you when something will happen. A celestial event, a convergence. The answer isn't here, locked away with the forbidden texts. They taught you that a king's word was law, that a peasant's life was forfeit to his lord's command. That is the story they wanted you to believe. But you are here, now, in a clearing deep in the woods, far from the prying eyes of the reeve, and the air tastes of treason. The air is cold, sharp with the scent of pine and damp earth. A single hooded lantern throws your shadows long and dancing against the ancient oaks, turning the gathered faces into masks of flickering gold and deep-set darkness. There are dozens of you. This is the secret they don't want you to know. The secret of the Beguines. 99% of people today imagine medieval women as either chattel in a marriage or prisoners in a convent. They never learn about this third way. The Beguines were one of the most powerful and revolutionary social movements in European history, and the Church tried to erase them from existence. They were communities of women who lived and worshipped together, but they took no lifelong vows. They answered to no bishop, no priest, no abbot. But the greatest secret, the one that holds the key to your survival, the one that makes the bailiff's hand tremble when he crosses your threshold, isn't in the clever roof or the breathing hearth. It is buried. It is directly beneath your feet, in the one place the authorities are too terrified of God and the devil to ever dare look. Beneath the green smell of splintered pine, a sweet, sickish odor of rot clings to the back of your throat. But there's something else too. A sharp, acidic tang that stings your nostrils. Vinegar. Someone here is fighting back, not with prayers, but with a forbidden science so simple it feels like a sin: separation. This is a heretic village, one that chose to lock its gates, trusting wood and vinegar more than God and his priests. They were practicing the ultimate taboo: quarantine. From a slit in a boarded-up window, a pair of eyes watch you. You can hear the faint, wet scrape of the leather soles as they pull him from the hall. A sound you know will echo in your sleep for years. The old woman beside you slips her hand into yours. Her skin is as dry as parchment. She gives your hand a single, firm squeeze. The transmission is complete. But as the heavy doors boom shut behind the condemned man, you see the Inquisitor's gaze, no longer fixed on the stage, begin to slowly, methodically sweep the crowd. His eyes are not looking for heretics. Imagine knowing the earth is a marble spinning in an infinite void, but threatening to burn anyone who says it isn't a flat plate at the center of God's eye. This is a game of power, a tactic as modern as a corporation funding a study to create doubt about climate change. It's about maintaining your position as the sole arbiter of reality. By making the universe simple, they made God's plan simple, and they made themselves the sole interpreters. This machine proves it was all a calculated deception. It is a calculator for a truth they were terrified of. And now you hold it in your hand, a choice that could save 1,000 lives or end one very important one. The future isn't a thing to be made of gold. It's a thing to be decided. Her fingernail, cracked and grimy, scrapes against the forbidden text, and the soft, dry rasp sounds as loud as a scream in the suffocating silence of the convent. This isn't a holy book. It is heresy bound in leather, a text called the Mirror of Simple Souls, and reading it is a death sentence. The words are not about submission. They are about power. A soul annihilated in the love of the Creator, you read in a hushed whisper, is free. It takes leave of virtues. It is above the law of the Church. Tech corporations will create black box algorithms and tell you they are too complex for you to understand. Companies will patent the healing properties of a simple leaf your ancestors have used for centuries, convincing you that you need them to sell it back to you. They build walls of jargon and patents to make you feel powerless. But your power is all around you. It's in the air you breathe. You press your palm flat against the cool, firm earth of the floor. This house is a masterpiece of hidden genius, a defiance written in timber and smoke. You saw them die, clutching rosaries, their lips cracked from praying for a deliverance that came only as a final, feverish shudder. You heard the official advice from the pulpit: pray, fast, join the processions of flagellants whipping their own backs raw to appease an angry God. And if all else fails, flee. Fleeing just spreads the pestilence. 99% of people don't know this was the greatest, most lethal lie of the era. Piety disguised as a plague vector. The air here is different. It's the same fear that drives modern powers to use algorithms to feed you rage, to use media to slice society into 1,000 warring tribes, to keep you arguing about symbols and pronouns while they consolidate control. They bury this truth under mountains of division because it is the most dangerous idea in human history. The knight's head slumps forward. His part is done. The message has been sent. The guards hoist him up by his broken arms, his feet dragging on the stone. He was part of a chain of knowledge, a secret college that stretched back to the Greeks and their impossible clockwork computers. This machine in your hands is a direct descendant, an echo of the Antikythera mechanism, preserved not by accident, but by a conspiracy of scholars. You can feel the cold metal against your skin, a shiver that has nothing to do with the damp. This is the ultimate institutional gaslighting. Imagine possessing the cure for a disease, but telling the world that prayer is the only answer. You have unlocked a secret that can heal the body. But in the process of your research, in understanding how to purify and concentrate these elements, you've discovered something else. You have also learned how to create poisons of unimaginable potency. You have learned how to break down the world, not just build it up. Your greatest discovery wasn't a cure for the body. It was a poison for the system, a weapon that could destabilize an entire kingdom. The words on the page are a sin that could burn you alive. The church buried this secret with fire and blood, but tonight, by the light of a single, sputtering candle, you are digging it up. You are in a stone cell, so cold your breath fogs in the air. The smell is of damp wool, tallow wax, and the metallic tang of your own fear. Your companion, Sister Agnes, her face a mask of shadows and light, points a trembling finger at the vellum. On the main beam, hidden in the smoky darkness, you trace a small, familiar carving with your finger. A spiral. The same mark archaeologists are now finding on the foundations of excavated longhouses, shocked to uncover complex drainage systems and flood-resistant footings, engineering supposedly lost to the world when the last Roman legions fled. It wasn't lost. It was passed down, whispered from one generation to the next, marked with this symbol. It makes a bitter taste rise in your throat, the metallic taste of controlled ignorance. It's the same lie they tell in the future. What they don't want you to know is that the holiest prayers of the 14th century were in fact a death sentence. The church promised salvation if you would only believe, but the Black Death didn't care about belief. It only cared about bodies. You stand at the edge of the world, or what feels like it. A crude barrier of felled trees and splintered wagons blocks the road. It's silent, a deep, hollow silence that swallows the sound of your own ragged breath. Your village is gone. This is the one truth all authoritarian systems, medieval or modern, will kill to suppress. The profound, world-shattering realization that people, when connected, do not need them. This is why they had to be erased, not because they spat on a cross, but because they built a new one, a crossroads of knowledge, open to all. The Inquisitor drones on, but you don't hear him. You are looking at the spiral. It's not just a symbol, it's a diagram of their world and a blueprint for a new one. A world that terrified the powerful then and terrifies them now. 99% of people believe the wisdom of the ancient world was lost to fire and barbarism. The truth is far more sinister. It was curated, it was censored, and in secret cloisters like this, it was studied. While the church fed the masses a diet of superstition and divine order, they kept the real knowledge for themselves. Men like the Irish monk Virgilius of Salzburg were publicly condemned as heretics in the 8th century for believing the world was a sphere, for daring to suggest other worlds existed under our feet. But he wasn't a lone madman, except here, in the flickering candlelight of your laboratory. The evidence suggests it was real. The hunt for gold was a brilliant, shimmering misdirection. It allowed you and a secret network of others to conduct the most important research in human history, right under the noses of the authorities who would have burned you for it. They laughed at your supposed greed while you were decoding the pharmacy of God. But as you hold the finished vial up to the candlelight, a single, perfect drop of clear liquid shimmering within, a cold dread washes over you. They saved hundreds of texts, but they only ever feared one. A book so dangerous, its surviving copies are still hunted, and its true secret has never been understood. The roof is a collector, angled to capture every last drop of the low winter sun. A passive solar heating system that turns your hovel into a gentle oven, while the Lord's stone walls bleed heat and radiate a perpetual, soul-crushing cold. This is the forbidden knowledge, not witchcraft, not heresy, but a sophisticated, independent understanding of physics that owes nothing to the church, the universities, or the nobility. It is a direct challenge to their monopoly on intelligence, and that is why they fear it. That is why they call it superstition. It wasn't just a guide to fighting a fever. It was a guide to surviving a state-sanctioned apocalypse. A monk in a forgotten scriptorium who rediscovered a lost Roman text on crop rotation could have that wisdom carried by a Templar caravan to a farming collective on the German frontier. The Beguines' radical ideas of a world without lords, the Templars' knowledge of Eastern mathematics and finance, it was all flowing through the same hidden channels, a system of mutual aid that operated completely outside the rigid pyramid of king, lord, bishop, and serf. It was a society based on cooperation, not command, a horizontal web, not a vertical chain. Your fingertips are raw from prying the stone from the wall, a sound that scraped against the silence, like a dying man's last breath. Behind it was not a relic, not a saint's bone, but this, a dense, heavy thing of interlocking bronze gears, a labyrinth of metal teeth and dials covered in symbols you've never seen in any holy book. It hums with a silent, cold intelligence. It's a machine. What they don't want you to know is that the light of science was never extinguished. It was simply hidden. You are discovering a power that comes not from God or a king, but from the earth itself. From moldy bread and fermented barley, you are finding heaven in a grain of sand. This is why they buried your truth under accusations of fraud, heresy, and black magic. Because a healthy, self-sufficient populace is a populace that starts asking questions. A populace that is much, much harder to control. It's a story you've heard whispered today. In the darkest corners of our own world, conspiracy theories about miracle cures being suppressed by the powerful. They will call it the Renaissance, and they will never know it was born in terror, in secret rooms just like this one. Your hand aches, your candle sputters its final warning. You have saved another page, another sliver of a lost civilization. But as you hide the Roman blueprint back inside the hollowed-out spine of a saint's biography, you think of the other book, the one your master keeps wrapped in oilcloth and buried beneath the flagstones of the charnel house. It's not Roman, it's not Greek, it's something older, something stranger. You look up at the great curved timbers that give the house its name. They look like the ribs of a starved beast, but your grandfather taught you what to see. The precise angle of the roof isn't just for shedding rain. You feel it now, a faint, ghostly warmth on your cheek, though the sun is hidden by a blanket of gray cloud. As you gather your illicit medicine, your eyes fall again on the symbol. You understand its first meaning now. It's a key to a hidden world of medicine. But a cold realization washes over you, colder than the cellar floor. The medical secrets were just the beginning. They were a test. If you understood the lie about sickness, you might be ready for the greater lie about survival. The symbol held a darker purpose, a second layer of meaning hidden in plain sight. You see it now, the threads connecting everything you've witnessed. The spiral on the farmer's side handle, the pattern woven into the Beguine's tapestry, the diagram in the monk's forbidden book. It was never about a single hidden object or a piece of gold. It was a hidden society. What they don't want you to know is that this network was the ultimate threat to their power. A peasant in Aquitaine with a cure for cattle blight could pass that knowledge through a traveling friar to a community in Flanders. The church taught you the stars were fixed points of light in a simple crystal sphere, with Earth at its sacred center. But the box in your hands is proof that they knew it was a lie. You are in the lung-burning cold of a forgotten cellar, beneath a remote monastery carved into the Irish coastline. The air is thick with the ghosts of burnt-out candles and the sweet, damp rot of 1,000 years of secrets. A metaphor for a perfect universal medicine, an elixir that could end the fevers, stop the plagues, and silence the screaming agony of a world without anesthesia. Imagine the terror of the church, the panic of the nobility. If they knew what you were truly doing, their power is built on fear and dependence. They control the narrative of salvation. God sends the plague, and only the church can offer prayers for deliverance. A Lord's physician, with his leeches and useless tinctures, is the only hope for a sick nobleman. But you, a secret network, a fragile web of dissident monks like you, of peasants who can't read but know the value of a hidden scroll, of women who pass down herbal knowledge in hushed tones. You are not just hiding, you are a rescue operation. You are the thin, frayed line of memory, desperately pulling fragments of a forgotten world from the fire. These fragments, these scraps of engineering, medicine, and philosophy, will one day be stitched together to create a new dawn. You watch the smoke not just rise, but spiral, dancing in the column of light from the smoke hole. The cold, heavy air from the walls is pulled silently across the floor, feeding the flames that warm it, sending it rushing upwards to push the stale air out. It's a convection engine, a breathing lung built of wood and daub, a technique that educated architects in stone castles would fail to replicate for another 400 years. They shiver in their tapestried fortresses, choking on their own smoke, while you live inside a machine that cleans its own air. The goal is the same now as it was then. Control the cure, and you control the people. For you, huddled in this cellar, knowing this secret means a chance at survival for your family. But to be caught practicing it means the pyre. The symbol on the stone was your guide, your access to this life-saving truth. Using it was a death sentence. You finish your work, scraping the last of the precious green paste from the mortar. Your fingernails catch on the rough stone, the sound a tiny screech in the dark, starting from the center and moving outward. This is not a confession. This is a broadcast. What 99% of people will never understand, what has been scrubbed from the ledgers of history, is that the charges of demon worship and obscene rituals were a spectacular lie. A piece of theater designed to hide a much more terrifying truth. The real crime, the one that united the King of France and the Pope in a campaign of annihilation, was not heresy, it was connection. The secret that cost 15,000 men their lives wasn't a secret at all. It was a network. The monk's prayer is a lie, not to God, but to the world watching him. The endless, droning chant you imagine, the mindless repetition in a cold stone cell. That's the cover story, the greatest intellectual deception of the Middle Ages. 99% of people believe it, seeing only piety. They don't see the sophisticated psychological conditioning happening right before their eyes. They don't see the mind hacking. You are sitting in the scriptorium. You aren't making gold. You're making an antibiotic. What they don't want you to know is that alchemy was often code. It was a shield for forbidden chemistry, for a new kind of medicine that threatened the very foundations of power. Historians are only now re-examining the texts of figures like Paracelsus, and what they're finding isn't magical nonsense. They're finding sophisticated, repeatable recipes for chemical compounds, antiseptics, and powerful painkillers. The Philosopher's Stone, that legendary substance that could turn metal to gold and grant eternal life, wasn't a magic rock. It was a metaphor. It was a centuries-long policy, a slow, deliberate cultural demolition. It was the historical equivalent of a global government methodically shutting down every server, cutting every cable, and burning every book to control a single narrative. They created a world where you've never seen a toothbrush, where you believe demons live in the morning fog, where your town blames sick goats for the plague. A world they designed. Welcome to the Middle Ages. But in the cracks of this broken world, something is happening. A single perfect drop of rainwater detaches from a blade of straw and strikes the floor with a soft pat, a sound that becomes the slow, wet metronome of your life. You close your eyes. You feel it not with your skin, but with your bones. A draft, but it's not a draft. It's a current. It's a design. 99% of people, even the historians who study your life, believe the central hearth is just a primitive way to keep warm. They don't understand the secret geometry. They were stunned. This ancient potion, this superstition, didn't just work. It annihilated one of the most terrifying modern superbugs on the planet. It killed up to 90% of methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, or MRSA, a bacteria that laughs at our strongest antibiotics. This wasn't a fluke. It was science. A hidden, suppressed science that could have saved millions. The metallic taste of fear is in your mouth as you work. The suppression of this knowledge feels chillingly familiar, doesn't it? It mirrors the modern strategy of discrediting cheap, effective, non-patentable remedies in favor of expensive, corporate-owned pharmaceuticals. They are not vacant with pain or shame. They are searching, scanning, hunting through the sea of faces. And then they find you. Or rather, they find the face of the old woman standing beside you, the one they call a midwife, but you know is something more. For a single eternal second, his gaze locks with hers, and as he recites the next forced blasphemy, his left hand, resting on his knee, begins to move. It is almost invisible. A thumb, blackened beneath the nail, traces a slow, deliberate shape on the worn leather of his breeches. A spiral. Their bones tell the story of their bodies, but the truth of their minds, of a forgotten mental fortitude that made them truly dangerous to the established order. That evidence is hidden somewhere else entirely, and it's a story that changes not just the past, but the way you see the present and the future you believe is possible. All around you, glass retorts, like alien fruit, bubble and hiss over open flames. The only sound is the fire's hungry crackle and the delicate, almost musical clink of glass as you make a slight adjustment. You are an alchemist, but you haven't looked at a lump of lead in years. Your gaze is fixed on something else entirely. A strange, fermented grain mixture, thick and pungent, from which you are carefully, painstakingly distilling a single clear drop of liquid. Your guide isn't a spell book. It's a diagram, meticulously copied from a forbidden text, marked with the familiar, ancient spiral. But the truth, the secret passed down from one rogue librarian to the next, is that it also condemned advanced texts on medicine that could save a child from a fever. It condemned astronomical charts that proved the Earth was not the center of all things. It condemned the philosophies of thinkers like Hypatia of Alexandria, a woman of science so brilliant they had to tear her apart, because her ideas empowered the individual mind over the institutional dogma. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria wasn't a single tragic fire. That's the fairy tale they tell children. The thing they never tell you about poverty is that it's a disguise. You stand in the center of your world, a single-room, cruck-frame house, and you can feel the lie the nobles want you to believe. They want you to think this is a cage of mud and sticks, a symbol of your simple mind. They are wrong, and their mistake could be their undoing. The air is thick with the ghosts of 100 smells, the sharp tang of wood smoke, the damp, earthy breath of the packed dirt floor, the sweet, sickly scent of rotting thatch overhead. It isn't a book of spells. It's a pharmacopoeia, a record of complex herbal remedies and antibacterial recipes so advanced that modern science is only now catching up. Imagine this, a recipe for an eye infection, a blinding sickness that sweeps through villages. It calls for garlic and onion, or a related plant from the allium family, crushed together, mixed with wine and bile from a cow's stomach. It sounds like a witch's brew, a disgusting, desperate superstition. Except it wasn't. In 2015, scientists at the University of Nottingham, armed with their sterile labs and electron microscopes, recreated this 1,000-year-old remedy. Jacques de Molay's most trusted brother-in-arms, now a ghost of a man. His body is a roadmap of pain, his limbs hanging at unnatural angles. They have broken his bones, but not his will, not yet. He begins to speak, his voice a dry rasp, a sound like dead leaves skittering across pavement. I confess to the sin of heresy. A collective gasp, a ripple of morbid satisfaction moves through the crowd. I confess to spitting upon the holy cross. His voice cracks on the last word. But you aren't watching his mouth. You are watching his eyes. That idea is a fire that no ruling class can afford to let spread. It's a truth so threatening, they would rather you believe your ancestors were weak than know they were living proof that our systems are not inevitable. But the real secret, the one that truly terrified them, wasn't just the strength in their arms or the power in their legs. That physical resilience was a symptom of something deeper, a hidden discipline of the mind, forged in the crucible of survival, a way of seeing the world that we have been systematically taught to forget. You think alchemists were fools chasing an impossible dream. You think they were charlatans in smoky cellars, trying to turn dull lead into shining gold. That's the story they wanted you to believe. That's the cover story. The real secret they were hunting was far more valuable, far more dangerous, and it's a truth 99% of people will never learn. The heat from the furnace makes your face feel tight, your skin slick with sweat. The air is thick, a sharp, metallic cocktail of sulfur and mercury that stings the back of your throat. They burned books to destroy the evidence that humanity had ever been brilliant without them. They burned books to create a single, approved version of history, a history where they were the sole source of light, knowledge, and power. They buried the past to own the future. You think of the list, the one they whisper about, the Decretum Gelasianum, issued centuries ago in 496 AD. They called it a list of condemned gospels. The figure melts away before you can see a face. You clench your fist, your heart a frantic drum against your ribs. As the guards drag Elsbeth toward the waiting pyre, you dare a glance at your hand. It's a small, smooth river stone. Carved into its surface is the broken circle. The message isn't a warning anymore. It's an inheritance. The fight isn't over. It has just become yours. They need you to believe that only their rituals, their tithes, their control can save your soul or your body. Your secret medicine is a rebellion in a bowl. 99% of people believe medieval medicine was nothing but superstition and bloodletting. They believe you are a fool, mixing weebs in the dark. But the truth was buried, systematically destroyed, its practitioners hunted and burned. A recently translated 11th century manuscript, a book they failed to erase, called the Lacnunga, proves it. The words they force from his mouth are not his own. The real confession is happening in the silence, in the space between the ragged breaths. You are standing in the back of the great hall, the cold of the stone floor seeping through the thin soles of your shoes. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, damp wool, and the holy incense that fails to cover the stench of fear. On the dais, flanked by grim-faced bishops and a royal inquisitor whose eyes are like chips of flint, is the knight. Imagine being told your whole life that you are climbing a ladder, that every generation is an improvement on the last, only to discover a forgotten peak, a time when the lowest of the low stood taller than their descendants. Why would they bury this truth? Because it's the most dangerous idea in human history, that a collapse of the old order can be profoundly beneficial for the common person. That progress isn't a straight line guaranteed by the people in charge. It suggests that sometimes the world must break for the forgotten to flourish. It's the same institutional gaslighting we see today, the same instinct to downplay the contributions of women who dare to build, discover, or conquer. But the cover-up goes deeper. On the Order's founding charter, a document lost for over 500 years, was a symbol that had no business being there. A small, elegant spiral. It wasn't a heraldic device of the Spanish court. It was a mark of allegiance, connecting them to a hidden network of power far older and far more secret than chivalry itself. Diagrams of aqueducts and gear-driven cranes swim in the flickering light. Sentences describe how a republic, a society of citizens, can flourish without a king, can prosper without a bishop whispering orders in his ear. This is not heresy. This is evidence, and that is so much worse. What they don't want you to know is that the Great Burnings were never about faith. 99% of people are taught the church burned books to cleanse the world of heresy. That's a convenient story, a simple lie to cover a devastating truth. It was a warning sent between people like you, a quiet, desperate message that a member was being targeted. They were fighting back, not with swords, but with secrets. The priest finishes his list of sins. The verdict is a foregone conclusion. Guilty. A collective gasp, part horror, part relief. The guards move toward Elsbeth, their boots scraping against the rough stone. The crowd shuffles, a beast turning its eyes away from the slaughter. In that moment of confusion, a figure bumps against you, a rough-spun cloak brushing your arm. You feel something small and hard pressed into your palm. It looks like small, fresh graves in the churchyard. What they don't want you to know is that this knowledge, the grinding of these specific plants in this specific way, is more powerful than any prayer. They call it witchcraft, not because it's evil, but because it's effective. It gives you, a common person with dirt under your fingernails, a sliver of power over life and death. And that is a power the church guards more jealously than the gates of heaven itself. They need you to be helpless. It's a message. The spiral wasn't just an oath. It was a key to a hidden library of that forbidden knowledge, a treasure they buried somewhere in the heart of Europe. And as the flames rose around their last Grand Master, he wasn't just dying. He was protecting the map. 99% of people today have no idea that for a brief 100-year golden age, the average peasant's diet became richer in meat and protein than it would be for centuries. Skeletal studies from this period show a stunning increase in height and a dramatic decrease in the markers of malnutrition and disease. For a fleeting moment, the common man and woman in the field were taller, stronger, and healthier than many people crammed into the polluted, diseased slums of the Industrial Revolution 500 years later. Imagine that. Or their valor. They were granted their own coat of arms and given the same privileges as their male counterparts, including the one that mattered most, exemption from all taxes. But what they don't want you to know is why their story was erased. Historians sanitize them, recasting these warriors as symbolic helpers, because the reality of their military prowess shattered the entire bedrock of the feudal system. The foundational myth that men fought while women were little more than property to be protected and exchanged. But you are not praying. You are committing a crime that is worse than murder. The only sound is the frantic, dry scratch of your quill across the vellum. A sound like a mouse scrabbling for its life behind a wall. The air is thick with the smell of melting wax, old parchment, and something else, the sharp, metallic tang of your own fear. You dip the quill. You copy. Your eyes scan the forbidden text. Not a gospel, not a psalter, but a captured ghost from a dead empire. It's a Roman book on civil engineering, on public governance. Elsbeth's eyes find yours for a fleeting second. There's no madness in them, only terror and a burning, terrible defiance. Her knowledge of herbs, the poultices she made for your son's fever, the willow bark tea she gave you for your aches, once respected as wisdom, now twisted into evidence of a pact with hell. Yesterday morning, you saw the symbol daubed in charcoal on her door. Not the cross, but the other one, the hidden one, the broken circle, the sign of the network. It wasn't a mark of witchcraft. It's the sound of yarrow and sphagnum moss, of dried leaves crumbling into a forbidden powder. The air is sharp with the scent of herbs, a clean, potent aroma that cuts through the mustiness of the cellar. This is a kind of magic, but not the kind the priest preaches against. This is the magic that works. Upstairs, someone you love is burning with fever. The priest has already been. He brought holy water and prayers, his words echoing hollow in the small room. He spoke of penance, of God's will. But you've seen God's will. The Templars weren't just bankers. They were importers of dangerous thoughts. The spiral on this tomb is the proof. It was the membership badge for a secret, borderless network of knowledge that the church and the nobility were desperately trying to destroy. It meant the Templars had secretly joined the very people they were supposed to be fighting. They hadn't just brought back gold and relics from the East. They had brought back a future that Europe wasn't ready for. And the old powers burned them to stop it from arriving. But this tomb isn't just a grave. This wasn't the bone of a starving wretch. This was the skeleton of an athlete. What they don't want you to know, the secret that the field of bioarchaeology has unearthed, is that the story of endless linear progress is a carefully constructed fantasy. The official narrative says the Black Death was only a horror, and it was. But for the survivors, for your ancestors, it was something else entirely, a reset. With nearly half of Europe dead, the board was wiped clean. Suddenly, there was land, there was food. You watch, breathless, as they don't just man the walls. They unbar a side gate. They lead a counterattack. The wet thud of an axe finding its mark, the sharp crack of a crossbow bolt, the defiant war cries of mothers and daughters. This is a sound 99% of people will never hear in their history books. They break the siege. This is not fiction. This was the birth of the Order of the Hatchet, a real, documented military order of female knights. The book in front of you could get you burned alive, but the real secret, the one that makes your hand tremble, is that it has nothing to do with God. The air in the scriptorium is colder than the stone it clings to. It's a dead-of-night cold that seeps through your wool robe and settles deep in your bones. Your only companion is a single flame, a tiny, sputtering sun dancing on the tip of a tallow candle. Its light throws your shadow, huge and monstrous, against walls that have seen 1,000 years of prayer. You remember young Greta, whose father's mill now grinds grain for the Baron after she was condemned for having a familiar, a stray cat she fed from her table. It's not chaos, it's a conspiracy written in ink and fire. They manufacture a monster to distract you while they pick your pockets. It's the oldest trick in the Book of Power, the one they still use today. Create an enemy within, a scapegoat for all of society's fears, and you can strip the people of their rights. Their land, their future, all while they cheer for their own dispossession. That symbol, carved into the cellar stone, wasn't decoration. It was a prescription, a secret whispered from one generation to the next, and the church would burn you for knowing how to read it. You can feel the cold seeping from the packed earth floor, a damp chill that clings to your wool tunic. The only light is a single tallow candle, its flame guttering, casting your shadow long and monstrous against the damp stone walls. In your hands, a rough stone mortar. You grind, and the sound is a gritty whisper in the suffocating silence. Shh, shh. Unbreathable silence. This was the secret they had to bury, because it shattered the single foundational myth of the medieval world, that Western Christendom was the sole inheritor of truth, the pinnacle of civilization. It's the same primal fear that echoes in the modern world, the chilling terror that drives nationalist movements and builds walls between people. It's the deep, unsettling suspicion that the other, the foreigner, the one you've been taught to fear, might have ideas that are better than your own. The terror that your entire culture is built on a lie. The air tastes of dust and cold limestone. You expect the bone to feel brittle, light, a relic of suffering. It is the opposite. It is heavy, impossibly dense. You run a thumb over the linea aspera, the long ridge running down the shaft. It's not a smooth, delicate line. It's a rugged mountain range of calcified tissue, a testament to sinew and muscle so powerful it warped the very structure of the bone it was anchored to. Your fingernail scrapes against it, an intimate, dry scratch that echoes in the profound silence. You huddle in the keep, the grating shriek of enemy steel on the main gate a death knell, counting down your final moments. But the battle isn't over. The heavy doors of the inner keep swing open, not with reinforcements, not with priests offering last rites. Women emerge, not cowering, but armed. Their faces are grim, set like stone, smeared with soot. They carry heavy wood-cutting axes, agricultural scythes, and crossbows scavenged from the fallen. One woman, her jaw tight with cold fury, wears a simple red sash across her chest, a silent, unambiguous symbol of command. But as you stare at the pages in your hand, you understand that this network, this spiral of trust, was built for something far more perilous than trading seeds. They were trading in the most dangerous commodity of all, forbidden books and the ideas held within them. Knowledge that didn't just promise a better harvest, but a different world entirely. Land the Baron, standing beside the priest with a pious look and greedy eyes, has wanted for a decade. 99% of the people here believe this. They see a witch, a servant of Satan who soured their milk and blighted their crops. They need someone to blame for the gnawing hunger in their bellies and the terror of a world they don't understand. But you see the ledger. You remember old Marta, whose orchard was absorbed into the church's holdings 2 years ago, after she was accused of dancing with demons. But be warned, some truths about the past are harder to forget than others. A French doctor would pray over a dying man. An Arab physician would set the bone, stitch the wound, and prescribe a painkiller. The Templars saw this, and they understood. They did the unthinkable. They began to learn. They created a syncretic system, a secret religion that looked like Christianity on the outside, but was powered by an engine of Eastern mysticism and science on the inside. They became a state within a state, a network whose power came not from a blessing from Rome, but from forbidden knowledge smuggled back in scrolls and whispers. The greatest lie they ever told you isn't written in a book. It's carved into bone, a truth so profound that history itself was rewritten to hide it. They built a cathedral of falsehoods around the image of the medieval peasant, a stooped, wretched thing, broken by famine, cowering in the mud. And for 1,000 years, we believed them. But here, in the silent, chilled air of the ossuary, surrounded by the quiet counsel of the dead, you learn the truth. Your hand, warm and alive, closes around the femur of a 14th century farmer. The story they sold you is a lie. The tales of knights in shining armor, a holy brotherhood of elite male warriors sworn to protect the weak, it's a carefully constructed fantasy designed to keep a far more dangerous truth buried. You are in Tortosa, Spain. The year is 1149. The air is thick with the metallic tang of blood and the greasy smoke of burning homes. You can taste the dust, the fear, the failure. The men of the town, the so-called protectors, have been routed in a surprise Moorish attack. It's over. A simple spiral, scratched onto a doorpost, a market stall, or the bottom of a mug. It was a trust mark in a faithless world. It meant this trader wouldn't cheat you. This house was safe for the night. This person was part of the secret, the real economy of survival. But this knowledge, how to grow more food, was only the first layer of the secret. It was dangerous enough to get a man flogged or exiled. The priest's voice slices through the murmuring. He holds up a withered turnip. "She bewitched this root," he screams, his face purple with righteousness, causing it to grow in the image of a man's member to tempt the pure of heart to sin. A wave of revulsion and sick fascination ripples through the crowd. But you know the truth. You saw that turnip pulled from her garden yesterday. It's just a turnip. Elsbeth's only crime was being a widow. Her husband, taken by the flux, left her the most fertile strip of land by the river. The first breadcrumb on a trail that proves your ancestors held a power so great, the elite had to scrub its existence from the memory of the world. By uncovering it, we uncover a truth about ourselves. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. What they don't want you to know is that the Templars went to the Holy Land to fight a war, but they found a university. They expected to find heathens. They found healers. They went to conquer savages and discovered scientists. They learned that the wisdom of the East, in medicine that could save a man from gangrene, in mathematics that could map the heavens, in philosophy that questioned the nature of God himself, was terrifyingly superior to what was known in Europe. But as you let out a breath you didn't know you were holding, a sound cuts through the night, a single, sharp crack of a twig breaking just beyond the ring of lantern light. Every head snaps towards the sound. A figure detaches itself from the deeper darkness of the trees. You are not alone, and the spiral in the dirt suddenly feels less like a promise and more like an epitaph. Because this challenge to the church's power wasn't just spiritual, it was martial. We know from surviving tax records in Florence that as much as 40% of all commercial activity may have been off the books, a massive, untaxable, and uncontrollable web of trade that the lords and the church couldn't touch. This is the ancestor of every gray market, every darknet, every cryptocurrency. It's the proof, written in soil and secret ink, that when the official system is designed to crush you, human beings will always build their own. To identify each other, they used a symbol. You stand in the square. the cold seeping through the thin leather of your shoes, a phantom chill that has nothing to do with the autumn air. It's the metallic taste of fear in your own mouth, thick and coppery. The crowd presses in, a single breathing creature of sweat, damp wool, and stale bread. Before you, the pyre is being assembled. You can hear the wet, percussive thump of the mallets on the unseasoned wood, a sound that promises a slow, hissing burn. It's for Elsbeth, your neighbor. The acrid smell of pitch and sulfur already stings your nostrils. They don't want you to know about the archaeological digs in deserted villages like Warham Percy, where they found farming tools modified in ways that defy the orders of any man or lord. The work of an intelligent, subversive network sharing forbidden knowledge. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. But the story they sold you of miserable, superstitious peasants is the oldest trick in the book. Convince people they are powerless, and they will be. This symbol on the hearthstone is the key. They lied about the past. What else are they lying about now? You can hear the faint, dry scrape of your own fingernail tracing its path, the tiny grains of stone dust, a gritty whisper against your skin. This is the secret. This is the heresy that brought an empire to its knees. 99% of people believe the story they were told, that the Templars were a military order that grew too rich, too powerful, and was crushed by a greedy king and a jealous pope. But the suppressed trial records, the whispers of knights under torture, tell a different story. The lie has not changed, only the language it speaks. The last pebble clinks into the bag. The old woman doesn't count them. She simply feels the weight, the balance. She nods. Once, a man kneels and with his finger draws a slow, deliberate spiral in the dirt. It is their mark. Not a cross, not a crown. A spiral, the sign of consensus, of a decision that expands outwards from the center, from the people. It means the plan is set. The harvest will wait. You trace the delicate curve of the forbidden symbol with your finger, the vellum cool against your skin. You feel a sudden, shocking sense of connection to these women, a lineage of defiance stretching across the centuries. You look up at Agnes, ready to whisper another question, but she silences you with a look. Her eyes are not fearful anymore. They are hard as flint. She leans in, her voice barely a breath, and she tells you the part of the story that was never written down, the secret that fire and blood couldn't completely destroy. Freedom from debt, from the Lord's suffocating control, from the gnawing fear that your children won't survive the winter. What they don't want you to know is that the entire medieval world was built on two competing systems. The one they teach you about, the official exploitative feudal pyramid, and the one they buried, a thriving, illegal, and enormous underground economy. 99% of people believe history was just kings and knights. But the real power was in networks like this. What they don't want you to know is that the devil didn't sign his contracts in blood, but in property deeds. They will tell you it was about God, but a secret buried in 15th century German court records reveals a horrifying truth. Over 80% of the women executed for witchcraft were landowners, their assets immediately seized by the church or the local lord. This wasn't a hunt for souls. It was a hunt for real estate. Your fingers trace a strange, spiraling symbol carved into the stone, a mark you've seen on the handle of your father's scythe, on barn doors blessed at harvest, and whispered in the rhymes children sing to ward off bad luck. It's a language hidden in plain sight, a forbidden current flowing just beneath the surface of official history. They call this the Dark Ages to hide the truth. It was an age of incredible, decentralized power that terrified the men in castles and cathedrals. They want you to believe your ancestors were ignorant. This is the ultimate forbidden knowledge. The greatest power has never resided with kings or popes. It has always belonged to ordinary people, the moment they choose to connect. This isn't just history, it's a blueprint. The same war is being fought today, not with swords and pyres, but with algorithms and censorship. They are still trying to break our connections, to isolate us, to convince us we are helpless. They sanitize the past to control your view of the present. They showed you a world of kings so you would forget the power of your neighbors. You move your hand to the side, into the deep shadows pooling near the base, and you feel it. A line, cut sharp and deep into the rock, hidden from casual view. You lean closer, bringing the candle with you. The light catches in the groove, revealing a shape that has no place here. It is not a cross. It is not a lion or a lamb. It's a simple, looping spiral. The ancient mark of the peasant, of the earth, of a wisdom far older than the church. Because it proves that the pyramid of power, the king on top, you at the bottom, is not a law of nature. It is a cage. And for a moment, in this clearing, you have found the key. This hidden history is a direct echo of every modern attempt to suppress a vote, to gerrymander a district, to sow distrust in the very idea of a collective voice. The goal is the same now as it was then, to convince you that ordinary people are not capable of governing themselves, that power is safest in the hands of a small, unaccountable elite. Sister Agnes turns the page, and there, in the margin, is a small hand-drawn symbol, a spiral. It was the mark of the Beguine mystics, found scratched into the walls of their secret chapels. It represented a spiritual journey that didn't lead up to a distant male god in heaven, but spiraled inward into the divine feminine within. It was a path that was free, female-led, and utterly forbidden. This spiral is a breadcrumb you've seen before. Etched on the stone in the woodsman's cellar, a clue to a network of resistance you're only just beginning to understand. A small bundle of pages wrapped in oilcloth. You lift it out. The paper is rough, the ink a deep, rusty brown. It's a copy, written by a careful, secret hand. And as you read the first few lines by the dim light, you realize what this is. It's not a prayer, it's a formula, a forbidden technique for crop rotation, using clover to replenish the soil. A method that could triple a harvest, turning a year of starvation into a year of surplus. This isn't just paper, it's freedom. The gate before you groans, a single plank pulled aside just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The eyes have made a decision. You take a step, leaving the world of fatal faith behind and entering a world of desperate, practical survival. You think you've made it. You think the battle is won, but you're wrong. Surviving the pestilence was only the beginning. Now, you have to survive the cure, and the wave of fire and steel the nobility will unleash to burn this defiance from the memory of the world. The church buried this secret for 800 years. They burned the records, hunted the guardians, and taught you a lie so complete that 99% of people still believe it. You wake in the dark. The air is thick, a heavy blanket woven from the smells of damp earth, dying embers, and the sour breath of sleeping livestock just a thin wall away. Your world is small, your life brutal. Or so they told you. Your bare feet find the cold stone floor. In the faint orange glow from the hearth, you see it,